She slammed her fist on my door and shouted, "Sign the HOA papers or we'll report you tonight." Snow was coming down hard, the kind that hides roads and makes sirens sound far away. I opened the door just enough to see her boots planted on my steps like they owned them. Karen held a clipboard wrapped in plastic and said, "This neighborhood is HOA only. You don't get to opt out." I told her, "This road is my access. I'm not joining anything." She smiled cold and pointed behind me. "Then you won't be using that road after tonight." Before I could answer, a tow truck crept up through the snow and stopped sideways across my driveway. My truck was already buried, my kids watching from the window, scared and quiet. Karen raised her phone and said loud, "He's refusing community rules and blocking emergency access." That was a lie, and she knew it. I stayed calm because I noticed something she didn't: the way the plow avoided one strip of land. The same strip my grandfather warned me about years ago. She stepped closer and whispered, "Sign now or this place becomes unlivable." I looked past her at the snow-covered road everyone used to reach their homes, the same road she thought belonged to the HOA. I felt the old papers in my jacket. Dry and safe. I looked back at her and said quietly, "You picked the worst night to threaten me." Karen laughed like I was bluffing. "You think a storm scares us?" she said, snapping photos of my driveway. "I'll mark you non-compliant and lock you out by morning." She waved at the tow driver. "Hook it!" The chains hit my truck with a hard clank that echoed through the snow. My son pressed his face to the glass behind me. I lifted my hand to calm him, then turned back to her. I said, "If you block that road, no one gets out." She rolled her eyes. "Not my problem." Then she did something worse. She stepped into the road and put up a bright orange barrier right across it. One of the neighbors shouted from a porch, "Karen, that's the only way to the highway." She snapped back, "HOA emergency order." Sirens howled somewhere far off, then stopped. Snow got thicker. The tow truck engine stalled. Karen's smile faded just a little. She tried calling someone, then tried again. No signal. She looked around like the night had turned on her. I reached into my jacket and felt the folded document. Edges worn, stamped, and signed decades ago. She pointed at me and said, "You did this. I'll tell them you threatened us." I nodded slowly. "Go ahead." I stepped onto the road, brushed snow aside with my boot, and exposed the old stone marker buried there. Karen stared at it, confused. I said, "This road isn't yours." It never was. Karen bent down and wiped the snow off the stone, then laughed. "That means nothing," she said, but her voice wasn't strong anymore. The tow driver leaned out and asked, "You sure about this, ma'am? This looks like an easement marker." She snapped at him to stay quiet. Then headlights appeared through the storm. Not one car, 3. They moved slow, careful, like they knew the road. Karen straightened up fast and waved. "Good, you're here," she said, already talking before the doors opened. "He's refusing HOA rules and blocking access." One of the men stepped out and looked at the barrier, the tow truck, then at me. He didn't ask for my name. He asked one thing: "Who closed the easement?" Karen froze. "It's not an easement," she said quickly. The man pulled out a tablet, brushed snow off the screen, and turned it toward the others. Lines showed up clear as day. "That thin road ran straight through my land, marked in bold." He looked at Karen and said, "This road legally belongs to him. Everyone here uses it by permission." Snow kept falling. No one spoke. Karen tried to smile again, but couldn't. "That's not possible," she whispered. I stepped closer and said, calm and steady, "My family gave access when there was nothing here. You tried to take it in one night?" The man nodded once. "And that's a serious problem." Karen backed away from the barrier, hands shaking. The tow driver dropped the chains and said, "I'm out," one neighbor whispered. "So we've been driving on his land this whole time?" I looked at the road, then at Karen, and said the line she would remember forever. "You don't own what you never asked for." Karen tried to argue, but the storm swallowed her words. The men with the tablet made a few calls, short and calm, then turned back to her. "You blocked a legal easement during an active storm," one said. "That put lives at risk." Her clipboard slipped from her hands and landed in the snow. They asked her to step aside. This time she didn't resist. The barrier was pulled away. The tow truck backed up and left. One of the men apologized to me and said, "We'll make this right." By morning, the HOA sent a notice to every house. No forced membership. No fines, no threats. The road stayed open, just like it always had. Neighbors stopped by later with coffee and thanks. One said, "We thought you were the problem." I smiled and said, "Storms show the truth." My kids went back outside, laughing, throwing snow, safe again. That night, I stood at the edge of the road and watched fresh tire tracks roll through quietly. The land was still mine. The choice was still mine, and the only thing I felt was peace, because freedom doesn't need permission.